Herbert Richard Baumeister was an American serial killer suspected of murdering at least 11 people between the 1980s and 1996. He led a double life. On the surface he was a successful businessman and a devoted family man, but in reality he was a ruthless murderer. His crimes remained undiscovered for years until he fled to Canada and took his own life, avoiding justice. Herbert Baumeister was born on April 7, 1947 in Indianapolis, Indiana, into the family of an anesthesiologist. His early childhood appeared normal, but as he grew older he began to show disturbing behavior. According to classmates and teachers, Baumeister developed a morbid fascination with death. He was known to play with dead animals and even asked friends what it would be like to taste human flesh. During his teenage years he exhibited signs of severe mental illness, including schizophrenia and manic depression. However, he never received proper treatment for these conditions. Despite his psychological issues, Baumeister finished high school and enrolled at Indiana University. However, he never graduated, dropping out after a few semesters. He found employment at the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles, where he was known for his bizarre and erratic behavior. Reportedly left cups of urine on his co-workers' desks and often acted aggressively. Over time, however, Baumeister managed to establish himself as a charismatic entrepreneur. In 1971 he married Juliana Baumeister, with whom he had 3 children. Despite their seemingly stable family life, there were underlying marital tensions. In 1988 Baumeister and his wife opened Save-A-Lot, a successful thrift store that provided second-hand household goods. The business was profitable, allowing the family to purchase a 7-acre estate, Fox Hollow Farm, in the suburbs of Indianapolis. However, behind this image of success, Baumeister hid a terrifying secret. During the 1980s and 1990s, young men, many of whom were part of the LGBTQ+ community, began disappearing in and around Indianapolis. For years police were unable to find a connection between the disappearances, but it was clear that a serial killer was at work. Baumeister led a double life. By day he was a respected businessman and father. By night he frequented gay bars where he lured young men to his home. Once inside his mansion, the men were subjected to strangulation. Evidence later suggested that Baumeister choked his victims during sexual encounters, deriving pleasure from their suffering. After the murders, he disposed of the bodies by burying them in his backyard or burning them in bonfires. By the mid-1990s, the growing number of missing young men alarmed law enforcement. A private investigator, Virgil Vandegrift, was hired by LGBTQ+ activists to look into the disappearances. One surviving witness came forward, stating that he had last seen some of the missing men with a man named Brian, Baumeister's alias, in gay bars. Detectives identified Baumeister as a suspect, but without solid evidence they could not obtain a search warrant for his property. The key breakthrough came from Juliana Baumeister in 1996. After noticing her husband's increasingly strange behavior, she discovered human bones on their estate. Fearing the worst, she contacted the police and granted them permission to search the property. In June 1996, investigators arrived at Fox Hollow Farm, where they uncovered the remains of more than 10 victims. Among the findings were skulls, bone fragments, and charred remains. When Baumeister learned that police had found the bodies, he fled before he could be arrested. For several weeks he remained on the run until July 3, 1996, when he was found dead in a park in Ontario, Canada. He had shot himself in the head, leaving behind a suicide note. However, in his letter he did not confess to the murders. Instead, he blamed his business failures and personal struggles for his decision to end his life. After Baumeister's death, investigators explored his possible link to the I-70 Strangler, a serial killer responsible for a series of murders along Interstate 70. During the 1980s, more than 10 men had been found strangled and discarded along the highway. While police never officially confirmed Baumeister's involvement, many believe he was responsible. Herbert Baumeister is remembered as one of America's most chilling serial killers, managing to evade suspicion for years. His double life allowed him to operate unnoticed. He used his home as a murder trap, turning his estate into a graveyard. Law enforcement struggled to identify him because his Victims were often part of a marginalized community. He escaped justice by committing suicide in 1996. Though he was officially linked to 11 murders, experts believe his true victim count could be much higher. Baumeister never answered for his crimes, but his dark legacy remains a haunting chapter in U.S. criminal history. Dallen Forrest Bounds was an American serial killer who committed a series of brutal murders in South Carolina in 1999. His crimes were marked by extreme cruelty and cold-bloodedness, and his story ended in a shootout with the police. Early life and biography. Little is known about Bounds' life before his crimes. He was born on August 9, 1971, in the United States. His childhood and youth did not attract much attention from the police or the public. Apparently, he had no serious legal issues. But at some point, his behavior changed, and he became a ruthless murderer. Bounds committed at least 4 murders in a short period. His crimes were chaotic yet extremely violent. 1. Murder of Nicole Barker. Bounds' first known victim was Nicole Barker, a 25-year-old woman. She was murdered in December 1999 in her home. The exact motive remains unknown, but investigators believe Bounds may have known her. 2. Murder of Julianne LaFawn. His next victim was Julianne LaFawn, a store employee. On December 23, 1999, Bounds entered the store where she worked and shot her dead. This murder became a turning point that drew police attention to him. 3 and 4. Murders of David and Joyce Fogelson. Shortly after killing Julianne, Bounds attacked a married couple, David and Joyce Fogelson. They were murdered in their home in Greenville, South Carolina. The exact circumstances remain unclear, but it is believed that Bounds may have broken into their house for robbery or had personal motives. After killing Julianne LaFawn, the police launched an active manhunt for Bounds. On December 23, 1999, he took several people hostage in an attempt to evade arrest. However, he was soon surrounded by law enforcement. When officers tried to apprehend him, Bounds opened fire, initiating a shootout. During the confrontation, he was shot and killed by the police. His crime spree ended on the same day he committed his last murder. Dallen Forrest Bounds is remembered as a cold-blooded killer who murdered his victims without apparent reason. His killing spree was brief but left a significant mark in U.S. crime history. Thanks to the swift response of law enforcement, he was unable to continue his deadly actions. Bounds died without facing justice in court, but his name remains on the list of the most brutal criminals of the late 20th century.